Hi, everyone. It is great to be with you, and I'm going to try to squeeze normally about a 45-minute presentation in 20 minutes, so I'm going to talk fairly quickly. I like to try to take the temperature of any audience I speak to, especially lately, so I kind of know where you all stand. And please be honest in your answer. I don't care one way or the other. I just want to kind of get the sense of the room. How many of you have a positive opinion of Donald Trump? Raise your hand. That's about, maybe half. How many have a negative opinion of Trump? Yeah, that's a little bit, but about half and half. So, my own opinion is, having worked for Donald Trump now for almost 4 years in one capacity or another and spent a lot of time with him, there's a good and a bad and ugly about Donald Trump, frankly. He reminds me of some of those cartoon characters in the 1950s and 60s with an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. And I'm always like saying my prayers at night, please, God, let him listen to the angel, not the devil. But I think, we can all agree that the economy has done extraordinarily well under Trump. And I'm not here, look, I am not here to sell you on Donald Trump. Everybody's going to have their own opinion. Actually, I was in Silicon Valley about a month ago giving a talk to about 300 technology executives and investors in technology companies. And I remember it was a room about 300 people. And I started by saying, how many of you in this room have a positive opinion of Donald Trump? About 6 raised their hand. Out of 300, I said, wow, it's bad here in Silicon Valley. And what was so interesting about that was after I was done with my talk, I sat down and we were having lunch. And literally about 35 of these CEOs came to me. I kind of like Donald Trump. You like him? Why didn't you raise your hand? And because people are, afraid to speak out. But anyway, so I'm not here to influence the way you think of him. What I want to do is try to help you think about what we're doing. I'm a senior economic advisor of the campaign now, and why we're doing it and how it's working. So I'm going to go over this very quickly. And by the way, these charts I'm happy to make them available to you if you find them useful. And I'm going to go over this at a kind of big speed. So why did Trump win the election? Because the recovery was not very strong under Obama. What you're looking at here is the bottom line is the strength of the recovery under Obama. It was a long recovery. This is, as you know, the recession ended in June of 2009. So we're now in almost October of 2019. This has been an incredibly long and durable recovery, but you can say it was weak. It was a weak recovery. And if you compare the dark blue line, which was the Obama recovery, versus, for example, the light blue line is just the average recovery of the 8 previous recessions, it was the weakest recovery we had had. And if you compare that with the top line, which is the Reagan recovery, look, I'm a free market guy. I believe in the principles of lower taxes and less regulation and sound money and so on. Reagan's philosophy in one sentence was, government is not the solution, government is the problem. And you can see the kind of difference there between a very, Reagan and Obama in terms of their approaches to the economy could not have been more philosophically different in terms of what they did. And you can see that policy matters. I wouldn't have been doing this for 35 years if policy didn't matter. It matters a lot. And you can see one of the messages here is the economy would have been $3 trillion larger if the economy had grown as fast under Reagan out of that horrible. How many of you are old enough to remember 15% inflation, 20% mortgage interest rates, and so on? And the economy was in ruins in the 1970s, and you can see the difference there. So and people were feeling that. One of the reasons Trump won the election is people weren't feeling the love. I would go to places with Trump, to places like Charleston, West Virginia, and we'd go to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, we'd go to Flint, Michigan, we'd go to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and we'd say to people, how's that recovery, Obama recovery, going for you? And people say, what recovery are you talking about? There isn't much of a recovery here. So I think that explains why people weren't really feeling the love, because there were whole areas of the country that were left behind that had no recovery. Okay, so the next one is where Trump has, I think, misperformed has been on the fiscal situation. You can see this is a chart that we showed Donald Trump almost 4 years ago when he was running for president. Larry Kudlow and I worked together on this, and you can see the projections of where our debt is headed. How many of you would say you're very worried about the national debt in this room? I'm not very worried about it. I am worried about it. I think it is a problem. I don't think it's a great crisis right now, but you can see what happened at the end of the Bush administration and the Obama administration, a massive increase in debt spending. And then what you're looking at is the projection. This is what we inherited. This was the Congressional Budget Office saying this is what happens if we stay on automatic pilot. And you all know, by the way, what is the single fundamental thing that's going on in the American economy that's driving that worrisome number? Demographics, right? We're aging. It's the most important thing that's happening in America, is that we're aging. Something like 10,000 Americans are retiring every single day. Every single day. Anyone born between the age of years 1948 and 1964 is a baby boomer. How many are boomers in this room? I'm a boomer. So there's almost 80 million of us. We're retiring at the pace of 10,000 a day. That's putting huge stress on our fiscal situation. We've known for 40 years, by the way, that the Titanic has been headed to this iceberg. The politicians never did anything about it. And you can see the gigantic surge in costs through programs like Medicare and Social Security and so on. But the other thing, the reason I like to show this chart is people are always asking me, what is the essence of Trumponomics? What is it about? What is the single biggest goal of Trump's economic policy? And the answer to that is very simple. It is to grow the economy as quickly as possible. It's growth, 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 growth. Our whole philosophy was, if you get faster growth, it makes every other problem in the United States easier to solve. And one of them it makes easier to solve. In fact, I would say it's a precondition to doing something about the debt and deficit problem. You got to have faster growth. And so the projection of a lot of the economists and people who do CBO, the official government economists, is that for the next 25, 30 years, the U.S. economy will grow 1.8 to 1.9%. And our attitude is, hell no. We're not growing at 1.8, 1.9%. We have to make it a mandatory, a kind of national mission to grow the economy at 3%. Because if we can grow the economy at 3%, you can see from that blue line, the debt doesn't go up as a share of GDP every year, it goes down every year. And that's the key. And we got to 3% growth last year. This year is looking closer to 2%, so we're underperforming where we should be. And so that's a problem. But we still think we can get back to 3%. And by the way, the single most important thing in terms of getting this prosperity, keeping it going, and making sure we don't have a recession, by far the single most important thing is getting a trade deal done with China. And if you come away with nothing else from this presentation, I will guarantee you this. If the day that some kind of trade deal with China is announced, and it's not going to be a blockbuster trade deal, I guarantee you. The Chinese are proving to be incredibly hard nuts to crack in terms of getting them to make a deal and change their behavior. I happen to think China has become a menace on the world scene. I think their trade behavior is outrageous. I think Trump is fighting a good fight here. But my advice to him, and I think that's kind of where the White House is, we're going to try to get the best deal we can between now and November of 2020. And here's my advice to you. If you think that deal is coming, and if you see it coming, invest, invest, invest. You're going to see the biggest boom in the stock market ever the day that trade deal is announced. And I don't know if it's coming. I'm putting odds at about 60% that we get a trade deal before the next election. But the ball is in Beijing's court. It's a really hard thing to predict. It's in both countries' interests to get that done. And I guarantee you, once it is announced, you're going to see it's going to be like taking a champagne bottle and taking the cork off of it. It's just going to go through the roof. So that's the one thing that's holding back growth. This is what does a bull market look like? I love to show this chart because you can see this is the history of the U.S. economy over the last 50 years in terms of stocks. You've all seen it before. It's a logarithmic scale. I like to show it because the 70s, obviously, you can see the green line, by the way, is just the stocks adjusted for inflation. You all know that when you make an investment, you're interested in your after-inflation return, right? Not your before-inflation rate of return. And what the interesting inflection points in this chart is you can see, that what happened in the early 80s. The 1970s were the worst period for stocks since the Great Depression. Stocks from 1969 through 1982 lost 60% of their value. 60% of their value relative to inflation. I think we can all agree that's a pretty ferocious market, and then ferocious bear market. And then you can see what happens starting. You see where the blue line just goes straight up. That's the the way I like to put it is the clouds dispersed. The sun came out, and God gave America Ronald Reagan. We cut taxes, we cut regulation, we got returned to sound money. And you can see what you're looking at there for the 20-year period from 82 to around 2000, the greatest period of prosperity and wealth creation in the history of civilization. Nothing ever has happened like that before in American history or the history of the world. You're talking about something like $40 trillion of increased wealth during that bull market. It started under Reagan. It accelerated under Bill Clinton. I'm not trying to be a partisan here. Bill Clinton years were the best year for the stock market ever. And then you can see you see what happened when the market crashed twice with the dot-com bubble bursting. And then, of course, the huge real estate crisis, and then what we now call the Great Recession. And you can see the bull market, since about 2009 has been very strong and very persistent. And the question I'm always asked, and the reason a lot of you are probably here, is this bull market running out of gas? And my response to this, that I've been saying, for 6 or 7 years now at these money conferences, is bull markets do not die of old age. They do not die of old age. Bull markets die because of bad policy. And by the way, recessions are created by bad policy, and we can go back the last 100 years, and I can point to the policy mistakes that created the errors. And so, as long as we keep regulations low, as we don't reverse the tax cuts, as long as we get this trade deal done and so on, no, I think we could see, you could look at how long that bull market lasted in the 80s and 90s. It lasted 18 years. So there's a lot of room to go as long as we don't make major mistakes. I like to show this because people are always asking, is China going to overtake the United States? Is China the country to invest in? How many of you remember in the 70s and 80s people thought Japan was taking over? Remember that? Japan is going to be the economic power of the next quarter century. You can see the red line is the Japan stock market, the blue line is the US stock market. I just think this is interesting because so many times the experts are completely wrong. And you can see right at about mid-80s when Japan was the hot country in the world, everybody was saying they have the future because they'd grown like crazy in the post-World War II era. It was amazing how fast Japan grew. And right at the time everybody said Japan's the future. For the last 30 years, Japan has had a flat stock market, and the US keeps going up and up and up and up. And I feel the same way about China. China is not going to overtake the United States. I always say the reason I know China will not become the world economic superpower is because our Chinese are smarter than their Chinese. There's a lot of truth to that, I think. So anyway, that's that. Is there a Trump effect to the economy? I mean, come on. Look at this. This is what's showing with respect to what's happened to blue-collar jobs. You can see the U-turn effect in terms of mining, construction, manufacturing. This is something, we're especially proud of. I remember right before the election, I think it was a couple months, Obama said, how's Trump going to create all these blue-collar jobs? He's going to wave a magic wand. Well, maybe he's got one. We are, ladies and gentlemen, I go everywhere from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine, and everywhere in between. We're in the midst of the greatest construction boom in the history of this country. It is incredible what's going on. Every city you go to, whether it's Nashville or Fort Lauderdale, even Cleveland, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, and all the places in between, building, whether it's condominiums, apartment buildings, warehouses, factories. It's unbelievable. And so this has been a blue-collar recovery. This is just something we're really proud of. That this is a spectacular achievement that we now have the lowest, Trump talks about this all the time, we have the lowest Black and Hispanic unemployment rate in the history of these numbers, or at least since the mid-1960s, since the Beatles were still playing together. I mean, that's a pretty amazing thing to look at. And I was asked on CNN a couple months ago when we got another one of these blockbuster jobs reports, because the latest line, of course, is this is just a continuation of the Obama economy and so on. And this woman said, well, Steve, do you think that this is just because of the Obama effect? And I said, this is the Obama effect. It's the effect that Obama is no longer president. That's why we have this strong economy. So what happened? What did we do? We deregulated. I don't have to get into this too much, but regulation strangles businesses. And we obviously want a good economy. I mean, we want safe workplaces, and we want safe financial markets. But we want to make sure that the regulations are guardrails, not roadblocks. And so that's had a big effect. I'll skip that one. We cut tax rates. Many of you have seen this before. Tax rates go down and tax revenues go up. This is the Laffer curve effect, and you can see the blue line. It shows that the top rate went from 70 to 28% under Reagan, and then look at that. The share of taxes paid by the rich went up, not down. Kennedy talked about this all the time. John F. Kennedy, by the way, I think if he were alive today, he would almost certainly be a Republican, not a Democrat. He wanted to cut taxes. He was pro-free trade. He was pro-life. He was pro-military. Paradoxical truth, the tax rates are too high today and revenues are too low, and the soundest way to cut the revenues in the long run is to cut the rates now. So that's fantastic. This is our tax cut. This is the heart and soul of what we did to revive the economy. It's so important, the idea that we would repeal this. If you want to know, you want to kill a bull market expansion, repeal the tax cut. It would be completely devastating. So you can see here that the black line is the US tax rate for the last 30 years. The green pillars are the shares of, the tax rates of all the countries we compete with. You can see they're going down, 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 down. And the whole story here is that the the US tax rate was 40%, the rest of the world said 20% on businesses. We used to tell Trump, and this is a chart, by the way, we showed Trump. It was what inspired our tax cut. And we said, Mr. President, this is like a 20% Head Start program for every country we would compete with. If we're at 40% tax rate and the rest of the world's at 20%, it's hard for American companies to compete. He got it. In fact, one of the things I used to say to him is, this is like a tariff we're putting on our own goods and services. How stupid is that? Why would you put a tariff on your own goods and services? That's what the corporate rate is. We got it down from 40 to 20%. Has it been a success? I mean, come on. What's going on is we're just soaking capital now from the rest of the world. That's the big story. Look at the capital flows. They're coming to the United States, not out. As I said on Fox News last night, the United States is now the alpha male economy in the world. No question about it. We're the only country that's growing. Everybody else is looking at us and trying to figure out how to do it. It's like that scene. Remember that movie, When Harry Met Sally? I'll have what she's having. That's what's going on here. Everybody's trying to figure out how we did it, and we did it through tax cuts and deregulation and energy policy, by the way. I'm not going to get into the energy policy stuff because, by the way, this is just a picture of what you were talking about. This is a great picture. So look at the red and green dots. Those are where you see, that's Pennsylvania, and then New York's above. And all of not all of them, but a huge percentage of the wells are right on the Pennsylvania-New York border. And yes, what's going on, you talk to people out there, they're drilling down, they're going underneath New York, and they're taking out all their oil and gas. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. And so energy costs are down. Clean air is good. The only thing I would add to what you're saying, not a single country, none of them, not one of them is reaching their Paris Climate Accord. It was all just a big lie. None of these countries are coming anywhere close. By the way, can anyone in this room tell me what, of all the 30 largest economies in the world, which country has reduced its greenhouse gases the most over the last 2 years? United States of America. That's because of natural gas. It's a wonderful fuel. I'm out of time. I'm going to just finish with this. Time is up, but this is the most important point, so I'll end with this, and I appreciate your sticking with me on this. So this is the basis for the rationale for the trade war with China. As Trump has said, and I think he said it very well, we didn't start this trade war. They did. They did. Our tariffs have been significantly, these were the tariffs that were in place in 2017 on average. Just concentrate on two countries here, China and the United States. Our tariffs were 3.5%, theirs were 10%. Is that a level playing field? Come on. They have not opened up their markets to the United States. By the way, talk to businesses, and they will tell you the biggest problem isn't even the tariffs. It's the non-tariff trade barriers that make it extremely difficult for American companies to do business in China. Our whole goal here is to get a level playing field. I think it's absolutely a just cause. By the way, China's, and you all know this, they're stealing $300 billion of our intellectual property every year. It's getting worse and worse every year. So this is the epic battle of our time. It really is. We are in an economic, and unfortunately more and more, we have to regard China, in my opinion, this is one man's opinion, as the kind of this is the new Cold War right now. China's becoming more militaristic. They're becoming more predatory in their practices. It has to stop. It was one thing to deal with China when they were a $3 or $4 trillion economy. Now they're 12 to $13 trillion economy. That can't continue. I do think Trump is going to win here. And when he does, and we get those, the whole goal here is to get China to lower their tariffs. We'll lower our tariffs. You get freer trade, and then you are going to see the biggest boom ever. Thank you very much. Great to be with you. Take care.